Buying a property in Spain. There are many reasons to purchase a property in Spain. The climate, the food, the culture, or simply to enjoy life. If you already see yourself buying the house of your dreams in the Mediterranean, it is important to be cautious and follow a series of steps. First, prepare a budget and take into account all the possible expenses. Remember to add transfer tax or VAT to the sale price, as well as legal fees, notary fees, and land registry fees. And even if it was love at first sight, do not rush or sign anything. The most important thing, especially if you're not yet a Spanish resident, is to hire an independent lawyer, a specialist who speaks your language and solely defends your interests. Together, you can review the characteristics of the house, should it have pending charges, negotiate a mortgage with the banks, and you will always be up to date throughout the whole process. But most importantly, fall in love with your property and do things by the book. Your new life starts there. Pellicer and Heredia, international lawyers.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you today for joining us at this webinar about buying a property in Spain in a safe way. Today, I'm going to introduce you the speakers, very reputable speakers. We've got Pedro Heredia, international lawyer.
Hello, good afternoon. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Pedro. He's rushing from Heredia today and he finally made it. So I thank everyone for their time, because it's very difficult, as you could appreciate, to meet all of us together to give the best out of it. We've got on the other side, Michael Davies in Andalusia. Hello, Michael. Can you see us?
Hi, Ignacio. Hi, everyone.
And from a technical point of view, we've got Djordy. He's been with us. He's an architect. And he's going to talk to us about all the aspects, the technician aspects that we need to look into it when he does a survey report. Hello, Djordy.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all.
Thank you for joining us and thank you for taking the time, all of you. Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic about what is buying a property in Spain. Buying a property in Spain in a safe way, because as we have always said in different webinars, buying a property in Spain is safe. It is not a problem to do, but you need to do things by the book, okay? One of the things you need to do is always appoint the right professional who are, number one, independent, and they are professional about the subject, okay? Now, we're going to start now with a few little tips about how important it is to buy a property in Spain. Okay, let me just start with the due diligence. The number one advice I will tell you is do not pay any money without appointing an independent lawyer. Why? Because he's working for you. He's looking after you and he will tell you the best for your case. Okay, sometimes you could, in business, you can make decisions and you could say, Ignacio, Pedro, Michael, I'm going to pay a deposit to take it off the market. But it is important to have everything very tidy. Pedro, I'm going to just explain a little bit a typical case about buying a villa and a few bits and pieces. Okay. And we're going to try to keep this webinar in an hour, but please send us your questions in case we could reply within the hour of time. And if necessary, we'll extend a little bit. Okay. Now, buying a property in Spain is a very important issue. Okay. One of the cases that we have here is, okay, I want to retire. I want to live in Spain. I want to buy a second home, a holiday home. And I want to do an investment. We will not start talking about the requirements about visa because we've done different webinars, but it is important at that stage to appoint someone. What I recommend you to do first, try to organize a video conference with an independent lawyer before committing yourself, because otherwise we're going to talk about rushing into bits and pieces, and that's stressful. And I don't think you like that, and we don't like that. Right. Let's say you come over to Spain and you say, Ignacio, Pedro, Michael, I found the right property of my dreams, and I've been offered this property for 250,000 euros. I think it's a great deal and bargain, and I want to make a deposit. Okay. Now, first question I will do, is it rustic land or urban land? Apparently here, we might be talking about 10,000 square meters. Okay. But sometimes you will have boundary issues, road issues. If the sea is over here, administration issues with the sea, with the roads, with any ceasing rights, or any path right away. Okay, so other alternatives, sometimes I found people having the trees, etc., and checking that this property and the pool and the carpet is on deeds. I think you will agree that it is important when you buy, since in Spain is a buyer's market, you will like to have everything in order. Could I buy in a different way? Yes. Would I recommend? Probably not, because if you're buying, you want it properly, or probably in some cases you will reduce the price, but you need to know exactly what you are buying. And there is three important things here. You need to know about catastro, which is a tax administration office, where it will show whether this appears on the map. Then you will have what the land registry will appear, whether you have charges, whether there is a mortgage, whether it's from somebody else, etc. And then you'll have what is the reality. And this is one of the things that I recommend, is for you to appoint a surveyor. Okay, Djordy might give us experience from himself about what are the issues he have found buying a property in Spain. But we could tell you from an independent point of view, we've seen all kinds of things. Okay, and it's very important for you to know what you're buying and whether it's got a solution, and how much costs that solution, and how much time you need to spend to get it sorted. Timing for buying, timing to get your paperwork in order. Okay, so you need to have a good people. And important, sometimes you might, probably later on, we could discuss about how you choose someone to represent you, but it is important to choose someone who solely defends your interests and you appoint them. Okay, it's very important not to be tied in with any other third party. Okay, right, so this is in inland. And I don't know if Pedro would like to add later on anything about this. The main things that you could see, probably the seafront problems we've been facing, the road problems, the eases, the right-of-way, the carport, making sure that everything is registered. Now, normal practice, how would it happen? You will be requested a deposit. It will go from 3,000 to 5,000 euros. Deposit that the estate agent would like you to put down with them. It is important in that document that you're entitled to have that money back if there is no illegalities. Okay, so it's important on this receipt that you're entitled. And if you're not going to be entitled, it's important for you to know when you will not be able to get that. Sometimes this money is even transferred into the escrow account of your lawyer. Okay, that's important. So there are different situations, but sometimes as well, you pay a deposit down with the estate agent. Now, in resale, we will be talking normal practice to pay 10% with a contract, okay? With a private contract. In the private contract, you will have all the characteristics of the property and all the obligations, all the parties will enter into account here, okay? And then, for you to know, we will give an average of 3 months, thinking that in the best case scenario, this is no problem, okay? So you pay a deposit down, you do a contract where you will say, I pay 10%. If I pull out, I lose my money. If if you do not complete because you don't want, you give me double, which means my money plus another penalty. That's what is normal practice. And then number 3, we will go on completion, because this is only a private contract between the parties with no public exposition. And here we will sign this document, even with power of attorney or with you there, we will sign it in front of a public notary, okay? From that date, we will pay the tax and we will register, okay? Register. I would like to make a special mention, because your lawyer will retain here, when you're the buyer's lawyers, you will retain potential problems that will come out from the price. For example, we're having a lot of cases now of plusvalia, because town halls, and I will ask Michael later on how he's coping with that, town hall are issuing straight away plusvalia tax, and then you need to contest it if you sold and you made a loss. But all these things are important, because if you're selling and the buyer is staying here, but the seller is going away and is moving abroad, then it is important you retain that money, okay? Right, so we've got the 3,000, the 10% completion, tax, registry. The tax, I will say, I will now give the importance, Pedro and Michael, about the plusvalia, because they're being very serious with it now, and they are after that local tax. Right, obviously, before here, what I normally recommend in this stage, you appoint a surveyor, especially when you're talking about rural land, okay, which is important. A lot of you might want to convert into a bed and breakfast, sometimes just renting, because you've got what you call casita, you've got the main house, and then you have another one here for guests, okay? That's what in rustic land I would have expect, okay? Now, if you're buying off land, that's a different process. Okay, I think Pedro could explain a little bit on the off plan now. And it is important you always bear in mind that things needs to be checked and do a due diligence. Okay, now I'm going to pass over to Pedro, and he could explain just buying a property, off plan, etc., etc. Okay, over to you, Pedro.
Ignacio.
Thank you.
I'm going to use also the black door in order just to try to explain a little bit what are the steps of buying a property, a new property, but also just to add some other things about what I recommend in order to follow the steps in order to buy a property, even though it's a new property or a resale property. I always say to the clients that the first step is to fall in love with a property. Yes, to fall in love with a property. But this fall in love, you have to be done with patience. We have seen many clients that have started rapidly to buy a property, and then they realize that that property was not the one who, the requirements, the family matters, situations was not the perfect property for them. So be patient in order to choose a property, choose the correct one. Once, of course, obviously, once you have fallen in love with the property. As Ignacio has said, the deposit obviously is something that is needed to be done. 3,000 euros, 2,000 euros, 4,000 euros, depends on the value of the property. And between that 3,000 euros and possibly the 10% is where all the situations needs to be checked. As it says by Ignacio, all the charges, encumbrances, land registry, catastro. We need to identify the seller. We need to identify the description of the property to check that the land registry is exactly the same as catastro and exactly the same as the reality of the property it is. If it has a swimming pool, for example, described in the land registry, that swimming pool needs to be described also in catastro. If it has a barbecue in the property, but the barbecue is not in the land registry, we need to update that in the land registry. As a buyer, and we as lawyers of a buyer, we check that in order to require to the seller to update everything accordingly to the reality. And obviously, to see that everything is updated into the planning law. This is extremely important. Ignacio was explaining this example about the 10,000 square meters. There are some areas that the land, minimum land needs to be 1,000 square meters, 1,500, 800 square meters, depends. Now, obviously, there is some percentage of edification that can be built on that property, and there is some percentage on economic value. We call it aprovechamiento, which is a right on planning. And all these issues need to be checked. If it's an extension on the property, or someone wants to extend a property because they want to make a garage or a parking or a storage room or a swimming pool, before buying, it's important to check that this can be done properly. And obviously, what we always choose and recommend is to hire an architect, as Djordy is going to explain us later. Okay, so once the property you have decide that this one is the one you want to buy, you have already paid a deposit, and we have checked with your lawyer, we have checked that everything is according to what you want to buy, everything is updated, everything is correct, then to pay 10%, 20%, or whatever is required or whatever is agreed. On the resale, as Ignacio said, normally is 10% paid in the private purchase contract, and then the rest, whatever it is, in completion date. What happens with a new build? What happens with when it's a new build? What happens when it's enough plan? When it's a land, it's still not building. Well, obviously, the building company has some requirements in order to guarantee you that the building is going to be done properly according to the payment that you've done. Let's put an example. Let's say that the example like Ignacio says, you agree a price of 250,000 euros on price on an apartment or a house with a land. And obviously the building company, whatever you pay, maybe it's 20%, another 20% during the process, during the 18 months, 24 months, a couple of years, that money that you pay needs to be guaranteed. That is extremely important. That needs to be guaranteed. So in case that the building is not done properly, the building is not finished, or the company enters in a bankruptcy, then you have guaranteed that money that you have already paid. Okay, that's extremely important. It's one of the main important issues that you need to understand whenever you buy an on-off plan in Spain, that the money that you pay is guaranteed. Without that, we do not recommend, obviously, to buy without these bank guarantees or without this guarantee that has to be given by the developer, but also by the bank. Okay, and regarding the new buildings, one of the in Valencia region where we live, obviously one of the differences, and different regions has different taxes, is that in Valencia region where we are is 10% tax, value-added tax. But also there's another tax, which is a stamp tax, which is 1.5. Okay, so for new buildings, think about that the cost plus lawyer, plus notary, plus land registry that we may be able to enter on a little bit more accurate with that, will be around 13%. Think about that figure, 13%. And maybe with a resale, it's lower than that because the 1.5 stamp tax is not, it doesn't appear. It's just 10% transmission tax. Okay, and another thing that I would like to explain before we enter on the questions, let me see if I can manage with this. Okay. Imagine that this line covers a year 2022, and this line covers 2023. Okay. Pedro, I'm willing to move to Spain this year. What is my tax situation? Pedro, I want to move to Spain, but before move to Spain, I want to sell my property in my home country. That's another question that is made a lot to us, that we have clients that say, okay, well, what is my tax situation when I'm resident in Spain? But what if I sell my property in my home country and then I buy, I reinvest, that's a word, I reinvest the money I got into property in Spain. Well, if you are over 65 years old, you are lucky, because will not be a situation where a capital gains will appear on that. But if you are lower than that, than 65 years old, then we need to manage with the period of time that you have sold the property and the period of time that you're going to buy the property. Let's try to put an example. Let's see that we are right now in May of 2022, and you sell the property right here. Okay, I think I'm going to need a new remote. Okay, and this line is 2024. Let's see if we can manage with that. Okay, you sell the property right now, and you intend to move to Spain, let's say in July or August of this year. Okay, and you have sold the property in, say, April this month or May 2022. You have until 2 years' time to reinvest the money you have obtained, if you are not older than 65. Okay, if you reinvest whatever is not reinvested, then needs to be taxed, and do not count the mortgage amount. If there is a debt, that doesn't count. It's selling price by buying price, whatever is the difference, is not reinvested, will be taxed. Taxed from 19 to 21, 22%. Okay, but if it's reinvested, no tax to pay. And what if I move? Well, what if I move to Spain? I haven't sold my property. What if I move to Spain and I buy a property, let's say in November, and I haven't still sold my property in my home country? Will I still have that reinvestment right in order to obtain this benefit, in order not to pay taxes? Of course, you will have also a timing in order to buy, and then you have another 2 years also to sell the property and get this reinvesting exemption on the whatever amount is going to be reinvested. Okay, I think it is a little bit complicated sometimes to explain, but obviously just for you to understand that there is a benefit on exemptions in case that you invest your home country, in case that you have lived more than 3 years, and even though the last 2 years you have not been living there because you moved to some other place, that still has a right in order to cover that property into your 3 years time of permanent home, in order to be able to be included in an exemption right. Okay, what else we can say, Ignacio? I mean, obviously there is a lot of information that we can say. Let's go through Michael in order to explain a little bit more about buying the process, and then let's go to Djordy also.
I think it's very interesting, Pedro, because Pedro just exactly explained the picture of somebody coming over here and starting a new life. So that's why we always insist it is important for you to do a video conference with your lawyer and talk about the conveyancing side, the income tax return, etc., and get the most out of it, isn't it?
Because at the end, I mean, taxes obviously is fully connected, and it's not just I'm going to go to Spain and buy a property, even though buying a property also is to buy to rent, buy to let, get some profit. What is my profit taxes? Just pure investment. But when you move with your family, obviously you are attracting your tax situation into Spain. Obviously you are selling a property. Maybe you are moving also a business. I mean, all these tax situations attracting to Spanish tax office.
And probably you might be non-resident and there is nothing to worry about the capital gain tax because it doesn't really apply to you. So we did put an article here about capital gain tax for residents and non-residents, okay? Just in case you're interested to read in the blog. And obviously, as Pedro stated, it is important to work out the situation for peace of mind. And I'm very grateful that our clients always try to do these things. Sometimes we get the problems from previous situation and it's unfortunate because we need to end up through the courts and you're already in a difficult situation you were put in. But obviously, we're here to help anyway. I'm going to pass over to Michael Davies. Michael Davies is a very experimental lawyer that we've known him for many, many years. He's a completely expert in law, specialist on inheritance law, but he's been dealing with a lot of conveyancing. So I'm going to pass over to him to tell you about his thoughts about buying a property in Spain in a safe way. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Ignacio, for those kind words. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, I just wanted to say about the falling in love what Pedro used with the property. Be careful with that. We've all seen what's happened to 𝐁𝐿𝐴 Deep because he fell madly in love. A bit of caution is needed. What I say is, if you're going to buy a property in Spain, 20 years ago, there weren't many English-speaking lawyers along the coast. There were just a few. But now you've got plenty to choose from. A lot of good lawyers around. Ignacio and Pedro up in the Valencia region are excellent lawyers. We like to think we're good down here in 𝐷𝐵𝐿𝐴. But there are many, many others that you can find out who the good ones are basically by accessing the British Consulate website. That's a good source of lawyers. Find a lawyer that you like. Have a Zoom call with someone before you come over and fall in love with the property, because then things start moving very quickly. So it's good to have the lawyer lined up in advance. I like what Pedro said about always recommending a surveyor. A surveyor is a great instrument for the lawyer, because not only is it a question of looking at the property defects and whether there's any problems technically with the, but they'll also, because they'll normally go along to the property with a search certificate, they'll be able to check to make sure that what they're looking at and what is there in reality really is what appears in the paperwork. So it will help the lawyer detect an illegal extension. For example, if there's a pool, the pool normally the client would mention, they'd know, but it's just good because they will just make sure that everything is there, because some extensions needed to be added to the title deed. There's so much that could be said about buying a property in Spain, but basically find a good lawyer, find a good surveyor, do both those things in advance. So from my side of things, and 𝐷𝐵𝐿𝐴, well, just to keep in mind that regarding when you're looking about the taxes and fees, ask the lawyer that you're going to deal with, because the taxes and fees are not the same all over Spain. Different regions have different levels of transfer tax and of document tax. They're not too far apart, but you need to check them out. The other thing is once you've purchased a property and you've decided whether you're going to become resident or remain non-resident, and the lawyer will explain all the pros and cons of those two systems and how you can basically access becoming a resident, make sure that as soon as you've purchased a property in Spain, you make a Spanish will to deal with the Spanish assets. What I personally deal with most of the time nowadays is with inheritance. And we deal with a lot of complex inheritances, and those are basically all come from the same reason, people that have not made a Spanish will. So make sure that you speak to the lawyer that handles the conveyance about making a Spanish will, and everything will be very straightforward. I'd like to just quickly finish by saying that if you follow the rules correctly, which any good lawyer along the coast will be able to guide you through this, you can purchase a property in Spain with 100% safety. You do have to follow the guidelines set out by your lawyer. And there's one last thing that I want to say, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you. Sometimes people do fall in love with a property, so much so that even if the lawyer ends up telling them not to purchase because of this or that problem, they decide to jump in Anyway, it doesn't happen very often, but we've seen it happen, and we've seen people get into a lot of trouble. So fall in love, yes, but always have another property on the back burner so that you don't sort of feel too eager to purchase that specific property. I think that's it, Ignacio, because as you know, Pedro, this is just so we could talk about conveyancing all day. That's sort of, I think, what I can say, unless people have some questions.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Michael. I really think you just raised a point very important here. When somebody falls in love with a property and still insist that they want to buy, they put it in a hard position, because we were just telling not to buy or look at these problems, etc., etc. Sometimes you just put everything on writing, the client accepts, the client signs, but sometimes even so, we don't even feel comfortable, and we just need to say, just walk away, you're going to have a problem. Or at the end of the day, obviously, we need to walk away, say, no, we're not going to deal with that, because you will end up with problems. Is that basically?
I say this, and you know, because we both lived together through the infamous 𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐼𝐍𝐲𝐢𝐧 country club in Almeria province. And I don't know, maybe 10, 12 clients I told to not purchase there because there were no bank guarantees in place, and it was all looking murky, and the land hadn't been placed in the name of the builder yet. But the properties, the price was just so good that it was, you know, a dream property for someone that couldn't buy, because it was just under the market value. And we must have at least 12 clients that came through the office. We recommended not to purchase and ended up purchasing. We know that they ended up purchasing because we later on spoke to them about suing the builder, etc. once they'd got into the
I think, Michael, you're being very humble. I think you've been advising a lot of people all through all your experience many times not to do these, not to do that, and we've been witnesses, and that's really very high value from you. You say don't do it. As you said, in Almansora Country Club and any other issues, they end up doing it and they have the problem. They come back later on for you to represent through the courts, etc., etc. And sometimes we achieve a good result, sometimes we couldn't, but I always should insist, and I always say very high, that Michael always said from the very first day, this is not correct, as we always had, and I really appreciate that from you, Michael. All your professional experience. Obviously, Pedro and myself, we did follow exactly the same path, but I should say in public that not everybody was so strict, and I think that's very important from independent lawyers, and that gives you credit, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to pass over to, now we found the property of our dreams as well as Pedro stated, and they are pushing us, because they will push us to put the deposit down, and you end up contacting your independent lawyer, and we start reviewing all the contracts, all the legalities, and looking with in depth all the legal paperwork, and we recommend you to find an architect. Now I'm going to pass over to Djordy, because he's an architect, he's an experimental architect, building projects and looking into things. Over to you, Djordy. What will you recommend to our audience that you will do in a report, or your colleagues will do in your report? What are the differences from different countries? Over to you.
Thank you, Ignacio. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank Ignacio and Pedro once again for inviting me to this webinar. It's a pleasure being here today. Well, my name is Djordy Roijen. I'm an architect and a project manager. I grew up in this region, which has allowed me to develop my career here. And the fact of growing up in Spain and being Dutch has allowed me to integrate and have a personal knowledge of the local way of doing things. And in the meantime, still have a clear perspective of how things are done in the UK and the north of Europe. Without going too deep into detail, today I would like to give an introduction of what we most look at when we inspect a property, and when we realize a due diligence or a technical inspection of a property. I am going to talk about three essential points. First of all, we look at structural issues. Obviously, the structure of a property is one of the most important parts. Depending on the construction method, building year, the state of the structure, this might differ. One of the most expensive parts of a property, obviously, is the structure. And then intervention on it may have very high costs, which might go up to 40, 50, even 60% of what the initial price of the property was. In our area, especially with properties built on slopes, for example, there is a high sliding risk. Repairing a sliding risk might even go over the cost that you initially paid for an existing property. It is important to have a property properly inspected before you proceed with the purchase and make sure the structure is in good order. Something we also look at are humidity issues. Health and well-being is, of course, an essential issue when analyzing a property. Moisture and humidity can make the most beautiful property you fell in love with, to repeat it once again, a nightmare. Therefore, it's important to analyze that no humidity penetrates the property, not only from above, from the roof, but also from beneath, where moisture can access the living areas through floors and walls. The third point, which is last but not least, is the importance to understand that the property has been developed with a proper license and is adapted and designed with the local planning regulations. Is the distance from the house to my neighbor enough? Is there any buildable area that I can use in the future? Can I build another floor? Can I build a guest house? All these issues are essential to understand the real value of a property, and also identify any problems that may occur or that you might have in the near future, especially on rustic plots. It is important to realize a proper due diligence, as there are many issues that need to be checked. Is the electricity capacity enough? Are there any nature areas that are protected which won't allow me to build or to extend my property? It might just be that the plot has some legal issues that haven't been resolved, that will need a lot of time once purchased. And of course, time ends up being money. And therefore, something that, let's say, costed 100 ends up costing 150 against everything that you expected. I think it might be a good time now to show the video. Juan-Fran, could you put the video, please? Thank you very much. Finally, to conclude, I would like to add one more point, which I think is really important, especially in the current times we are living. Well, at least at Uniq Project, we believe that the energy efficiency of a property is extremely important. Energy prices keep on rising and getting to price peaks we haven't seen before. The insulation, the kind of windows and glass, producing your own energy through solar panels can make a huge difference in the mid-long-term energy bill. A properly insulated property can make a huge difference on the real costs of a property that you're interested in buying on the long term. Well, please feel free to ask any questions you may have today, or send us an email for any concerns or further issues you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Djordy. I will appreciate if you could just put in the chat your email, just in case anyone might have some questions about building a property or the property of your dreams in Spain. We didn't mention, Pedro, Michael, about probably buying a piece of land and developing your property, or developing you being self-developer, which is a bit more complex process. But obviously, and definitely, you will need an architect such as Djordy to, number one, do all the measurements of the plot of land when you buy, then have the appropriate building license, declare the new build eventually, and issue the end of work, which is a guarantee that everything is secure and safe. And at the end of the day, applying for the habitation license. So it's just, you could be self-developer, as well as someone here in the chat is mentioning that we could be being self-developer, which you will end up buying the piece of land, which is one conveyancing process, and then declaring the new build, which is a different process. Okay, now we're going to go into questions. I think Pedro wanted to answer and run through a bit of them on the questions, and feel free just to send us, if we could, in these 10 minutes, run through them. Over to you, Pedro.
Okay, well, I've seen Tamara, thank you for asking us. Obviously, I have explained a little bit about reimbursement and buy a property in Spain, but obviously it's taxed in Spain if you become resident, and the year you sell the property, you are resident in Spain. Let me just take 2 minutes in order to explain this a little bit more specifically about this Article 13 that you, Tamara, says, and you are correct when you say that. Let me get it's right here. Okay. Okay, let's put again these lines that covers a year. As 2022, 2023, and 2024. And we always divide the year on a tax year, because the tax year in Spain comes from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. That's a tax year. 1st of January. If you live in Spain more than 183 days in Spain of the natural year, from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, you are tax resident. Okay, so what we recommend, in order for the first year that you come to Spain, that you become resident, if you're going to sell, if you're going to mature, you are going to acquire some investments, just to maybe just to start being resident in the second semester. So from the 1st of July to become resident, which means it's a presumption that you will be less than 183 days if you can become resident in August, in September, in October. That year, even if you are resident in October, for example, even if you sell the property in December, once you are already resident in Spain, it doesn't mean that you are tax resident. This year, 2022, if you become resident after the 1st of July, and if you live less than 183 days, then you will not be taxed at all in Spain, whatever capital gain you may have. Okay, that's important. When I tried to explain before, it was obviously in case that you are resident. Okay, in case that you are resident, and in this example, in case that imagine that you become resident now in April, and you have already sold the property in January, or maybe you sell the property in December, doesn't matter. If you live more than 180 days, then you are tax resident. And if you sold the property even before you were resident in Spain, you are tax resident in Spain, and for that reason, you will have to obviously to declare your worldwide income and gains and loss in Spain. Okay, I think this is clear. Obviously, the following year you will become, in case that this year you become resident after the 1st of July, you will be resident during this time, but you will not be resident in 2021. The following year, you obviously will be resident, and also you will be tax resident in 2023. Obviously, the first year is the most important year in order to know which is your situation about if you sell, if you reinvest or not. Okay, Article 13 about this double taxation treaty between Spain and Canada. What it means, what it says in the first paragraph, it says that obviously it will have to be able to be paid in the country where the property it is. But obviously, imagine that you become resident in Spain at the beginning of the year, and then, well, you reinvest during the following 2 years into a Spanish property, but you do not reinvest everything. And then maybe appears that you may have to pay some taxes in Spain. Obviously, if you have already paid taxes in Canada, that will be deducted. And if you pay more taxes in Canada, then you will not pay taxes in Spain if it's more than in Spain. But if the taxes to be paid in Spain is more than what you have already paid in Canada, then you will have to pay the remaining amount. That's what Article 13 says. Okay?
That's for Tamara, that she was asking this question. So it's good advice. Michael, do you want to raise any question from the chat that you are? I think interesting point is power of attorney. I don't know if you just see here that someone buying, basically, if you grant power of attorney to your lawyer and later on you disagree with something, as someone he was saying, I think it was Sandra was saying that granted power of attorney, but later on she disagree on the sale because of different shareholders, different beneficiaries of an inheritance. You could notify the lawyer that you do not want to sell or give consent to the sale, even though there is power of attorney. Okay. Obviously,
the answer to that is she can definitely change her mind and send. She needs to send it to, if she doesn't trust the solicitor, she needs to make sure that she can send it in a way that she can later prove that she has indeed informed him that she doesn't want him to use the power of attorney for whatever transaction she's no longer happy with. Choosing the person to grant your power of attorney is a very important. A very important issue, obviously, because of course, in practice, he could just go in and sign the sales deed at that price, and then she would have to sue him, etc. But if she writes to him saying, "I don't want you to sell using my power of attorney for X price that he's trying to sell to," and later on she can prove that she did send those instructions to him, she could later on sue him. But the buyer would be untouchable. In other words, he'd signed with the power of attorney the sale. The buyer would be the new owner because he signed with the power of attorney, and then she could later sue the person that used the power of attorney against her wishes. But the buyer would be untouchable.
Thank you very much, Michael. I don't know if Djordy wants to answer to any of the questions that we have here. Pedro, they did speak about the golden visa. I recommend, I'm not sure if who raised the question about the golden visa. I think it was
Let me if I can
John.
add a link. Anyway, we can add a link in the chat.
Okay.
But John, thank you, John, for the question that you are doing. It's extremely important what you're asking, John, because where we say about that, where we speak about that, and specifically for the marriage couple from UK, because obviously I would say in general, obviously the regime of marriage in the UK is, according to what we understand from Spain, is that it's separation of assets. Okay, and when a couple buys a property, and the property is between 500,000 euros and 1 million euros, let's put an example of 600,000 euros, a couple from United Kingdom, it looks like, and it is, because it's a separation of assets, that each one of them has invested 300,000 euros. So obviously, in that situation, will not be able to apply for the golden visa. The requirements is minimum investment 500,000 euros. Obviously, there is a situation where a marriage can invest between 500,000 euros and 1 million euros if the marriage is like a community of assets. It's like we call it sociedad in Spanish, is sociedad gananciales, that all the assets are for the married. So in that situation, from a UK marriage, should be invested more than 1 million euros unless the marriage agreement between the parties, between the spouses, are common community assets. This can be changed, obviously, yes. This can, obviously, the marriage, the regime, the rules of the marriage can be changed, and the property can be brought into that new regime. Let's put an example. Marriage has bought a property between 500,000 euros and 1 million euros some years ago. Notice that all the investment made in Spain after the 29th of September 2013 can be added into the golden visa. Okay, so all the properties can be included. Properties from land, commercial, apartment, country house, whatever property that's duly inscribed in the land registry. Okay, that couple that invest the property, which is 600,000 euros, has done it, and it says in the deed, normally it says separación de bienes, or it says in Spanish, de acuerdo con su régimen económico matrimonial de su nacionalidad, which means that according to the agreement, let me translate that, according to the agreement rules of, in this case, of its nationality, which is from United Kingdom in this case. It's a separation of assets. Each spouse has his own assets. Could be changed that regime as a marriage, say, before one date, it was separation of assets, and now on will be community owners as a matrimonial. And after that can be brought a property into a new regime, that property will belong for the marriage, will belong anyway for the two spouses anyway, even though before that is 50% privately, and after that is really is 50%, but is the matrimonial. Both of them are together owners of a property, which is similar, but it's not the same. Okay, with that situation can be added into a golden visa and can be changed into the land registry, that specifically regime of matrimonial, and then obviously apply for golden visa. One of the spouses will be the principal application, and the other one will be a family member. Okay, for the United Kingdom marriage, this is I think this is the solution, and I think this is the situation.
Pedro,
okay, well, thank you, John.
I'm going to add something to that answer that John, because John, if you see there, he mentions specifically Scotland, and I've seen this before as well. Now, because Scottish law and English law, they're both United Kingdom, but for example, their inheritance laws are very different. I don't know how the matrimonial system is, but I've had the question a couple of times for some reason from Scottish clients saying, what is our system? They purchase together the property and they say, no, but in Scotland, it's not separation of assets. Well, I've actually consulted it with a Spanish notary to see, because on their deed, the notary, when they purchased, just said, you know what notaries do in Spain when they don't know what the system is, they say, compran de acuerdo a su régimen matrimonial, a their matrimonial region. Well, these clients now want a golden visa, and they said, but our system, we're from Scotland, not from England. Over there, it's not separation of assets. Well, I actually consulted with the notary in Spain. If he put the economic region, what he did, would look it up and tell me what Spain considers Scottish region to be, and they have confirmed that they consider it separation of assets, the same as in England. I only mention that because I see that this, John specifically mentions Scottish law as if differentiating it perhaps. And I think it's because there must be something different about it, at least for them, because people do sort of say, well, what about, I'm under Scottish law, not English law. So Scottish law, we've checked.
Exactly. I think it's different in that way. That's
It
right.
must be different, but the Spanish
No, it is.
notaries, I've consulted
Yeah.
Pedro, and the Spanish notaries
It is.
still consider it from their point of view. They will only say separation of assets.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't realize, I thought it was English law, but if it's Scottish law, it's different. Obviously, I agree with you. Notaries in Spain, it still says about separation of assets, and it is not.
Yeah.
Okay, Djordy, is there anything else you need to mention here with regards to due diligence on surveyor reports? Is there anything here you would like to make sure the audience is aware of?
Yes, well, I see two questions that might be answered. The first one is from Liana Ruben. She's talking about purchasing an office in a residential building and converting it to a residential property. This obviously is possible. The local planning is what determines the possibilities of transforming the use of a building. Normally, when the main use is residential, it is possible to transform any commercial facilities to residential, but obviously every case needs to be studied in detail. Once again, the regulation not only depends on Valencia, it also depends on the council itself and the main use that building has. Secondly, the question I see regarding a property that requires joining two plots. Well, essentially, joining plots is easier than splitting plots. Excuse me. Joining plots is easier than splitting plots. We're talking about something that caught my attention here is the existing house, the 24 square meters existing house that we're talking about. Okay, please excuse me.
It's okay, don't worry. Okay, well, let's go to another question.
Right. He was talking about joining plots. To be honest, from my legal, let's see what Djordy says, but from my legal expertise, when you go into this kind of project, it's important, as I said, to have good architect, engineer with you, one lawyer, because registering property takes time. Register at the cadastro takes time. If there is boundaries issues, you're going to be, they might contest. And if you really depend on a little bit of paperwork, I always suggest to plan in advance, especially buying a bread and breakfast, buying an office, things like this, because things takes time. And the problem that we have when you alter all these things, they could even enter into, actually, we are dealing with a very, very complex file of 4 properties, bringing them together, grouping. There is a 5th one, putting the 5 together, extending the meters according to reality, declaring the property according to reality, and the sellers really want to sell, and they found buyers that really want to buy. But unfortunately, these things should have been done many, many years ago, and it hasn't been done. And now is all the stress because of timing. So, Djordy, would you like to add something about the joining plots that you were talking, or anything with regards to? Yeah, over to you.
Yes, well, first of all, apologies for that. Anne-Marie and Oliver, please feel free to, if you want, send me an email, and I will be happy to look at it in detail and explain you further on that. It really depends on every case, especially on rustic ground. It depends on several different issues. So please feel free to get in touch.
Okay, thank you very much, Djordy. Pedro, I don't know if there is anything else. I know Juan Fran is preparing a beautiful video about the sunny Spain. Anything else we should bring here? Michael, are we missing anything here?
No, I think it's good.
All right.
Thank you for all those who has listened to us. We can see that from Spain, from Oman, from UK, from Scotland, from Malta, from Canada. And well, Ignacio and myself will be in UK next week.
That's right.
At the end of next week. And it's a country that we have a good connection because we were studying there
That's
a long
right.
time ago. And obviously, we have a lot of clients from the United Kingdom that invest and live and residents in this area in Costa Blanca. As well, Michael is in the area of Andalusia. Well, thank you very much for listening to us. If you have any question, we are happy to attend you, to help you. And we have helped hundreds or maybe thousands, because we've been more than 20 years working on this. And we have helped many clients in order to, at the end, to become the dream of buying a house and become resident in Spain and live a fantastic life in Spain. And we're going to see in this fantastic video that whenever we see it, it's absolutely good.
Right. Thank you very much for your time, for your confidence, for your trust. Thank you, Michael, for being always there. Pedro, Djordy, exactly the same. Thank you from all the people seeing us all throughout the countries, different as you guys say. And we need to take you for only 1 minute to look around Spain if you just forgot how it is. Over to Humphrey and see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
You can't stop thinking about it. That hidden cove, just for you. That little hideaway in the mountains. Or that beautiful postcard town. Dreaming about enjoying the fresh air again. Feeling the sun on your skin. Exploring. Walking. Traveler, there is no path. Paths are made by walking. Never stop dreaming. Spain will wait.